Live right on time at 11:30 today, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Talk Sports Show with your host. I am Alec Pecano. Today on this show, we are going to go over and preview the Big 12 Conference. Yes, everybody's going to get a scheduled record prediction from yours truly. But first, before we start the show, I would like to announce that I'm offering memberships now to my loyal fans. If you're new to the channel and you have subscribed, I would recommend also getting a membership, as you get perks with the membership. And one of the perks is there's a level of the membership where you get to participate in a fantasy league of your choosing, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, or hockey. And I will go over the memberships now. The opener is the cheapest one, and that's 99 cents a month. The starter level is the Talk Sports starter level is $2.99 a month. The Talk Sports medium level is $4.99. Talk Sports elite level is $5.99, and the Talk Sports gold level is $9.99. That's one of two ways you can support the Talk Sports show, which is hosted by me. And eventually I will have a co-host. I'm currently still looking around for a co-host. And then the other way you can support me is by buying merch. I have 3 different types of t-shirts. I have a blue t-shirt, a purple t-shirt, and a white t-shirt. The blue t-shirt is $24. The purple t-shirt is $25, and the white t-shirt is $25 as well. And I have 3 different pairs of slides. I have a blue pair, a green, and a red. All $40. And I also offer tank tops for girls. All my merch is for girls, both guys and girls. And the tank tops, blue, red, white, $19. Please, I would be very much appreciative if you either buy merch or you buy a membership. It would help me tremendously. And now let's get into the show. Oh, hold on. Here's the show rundown for today. Today, we're going to go over the Big 12 power rankings. We're going to go over Big 12 news. Some of this is flipped around a little bit, like the Big 12 news and the other CFB news are flipped around. You get to see both of this at the beginning of the show. Then I will have record predictions for the entire Big 12. And I will also have my thoughts and opinions on the new Big 12 teams coming in. Let's get started. So, other CFB news. So, if y'all didn't hear my Big 10 conference preview, I talked about this. I gave my full opinion on this first topic. It is Jim Harbaugh being suspended. I thought he should have been suspended 4 games, but it sounds like it's going to be a 3-game suspension for Jim Harbaugh. The second news item is the Big 12 has added a bunch more teams. They've added Arizona State, Arizona, and Utah. And the Big 10 has added Oregon and Washington. Ohio State safety Court Williams is changing from safety to linebacker to try to revitalize his career at Ohio State. Northwestern transfer Nigel Glover, safety Nigel Glover transferred to Ohio State. And here's some more transfer portal news. Northwestern transfer tight end Chico Holt has transferred to Stanford. Oregon State running back Jam Griffin transferred to Ole Miss. And Miami of Florida cornerback Chris Graves has transferred to Ole Miss. Big 12 news now. After the 2023 season, Texas and Oklahoma, as most of you already know, will be leaving the Big 12. Will be leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC. The new teams joining the Big 12 in 2023 are Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, UCF. And the new teams joining in 2024, Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. And now we get into my record prediction for the UCF Knights. Week 1, they play at home against Kent State. I think they're going to win that. And as you saw in my CFB preview of the Big 12, I have UCF beating Kent State 55-14. And then UCF makes the trip out to Boise, Idaho to play in that famous blue turf. And I think UCF ends up winning that game. They beat Boise State 45-14. And then they come back home and play Villanova. I think UCF's going to start the season 3-0. They're going to crush Villanova. I'm not going to even give a score prediction on that because the only reason I think Villanova's playing that game is to get money, to get paid for playing a big-time team. Week 4 is the first Big 12 conference game for UCF in the Big 12. I think this is where they take their first loss of the year. At Kansas State. So they go to 3-1. They play Baylor at home for the Big 12 home opener, first home conference game in the Big 12. I think they beat Baylor to go to 4-1, and they beat Baylor 45-35. The next week, they go to Kansas. I think they beat Kansas. I do think Kansas is going to be good this year. You will see their record prediction later in this show. But back to UCF. I think UCF is going to beat Kansas to go to 5-1 on the year. They beat Kansas 35-28. They go into their bye week 5-1. They come out and they got Oklahoma. And I don't think Oklahoma is going to be an easy win at all. I like Dylan Gabriel. I think this is where UCF takes their second loss. So they're now 5-2. They come back home and they're upset and angry after losing to Oklahoma. And they're going to take out their frustration on poor old West Virginia. West Virginia is another team that I don't necessarily think West Virginia is going to be good this year. And I think UCF beats the brakes off of them. Beats them, I'm going to say 55-7, which makes them 6-2. Then they come home. They go up to Cincinnati and play at UC and play the Bearcats. And Cincinnati's another team I don't think that's going to be good this year. I don't think Cincinnati's going to be good. I think UCF beats them. That gets them to 7-2. And they beat Cincinnati 45-28. And then they come home and play Oklahoma State. This is going to be a test. I think they beat Oklahoma State barely. I think they beat them 41-38 on a last-second field goal to go to 7-2, to go to 8-2. Then they go to Texas Tech. I think they beat Texas Tech. I do think Texas Tech, not a lot of people are giving Texas Tech credit for the offseason they had under their first offseason under Joey McGuire. And Texas Tech, I will be giving you their record prediction too later on in this show. But I think UCF beats them 45-28 to go to 10-2. And they finish the season at home against Houston on Senior Day. And I think they beat Houston to finish the season 11-2. Now, here's my Big 12 power rankings. At number 14, I have West Virginia. As you heard, I am not very high on them this year because they could have fired Neil Brown in the offseason this past season, but they didn't because of his buyout, which in my opinion, I think that was a mistake. I think he should have been fired, but he wasn't. And I don't think West Virginia is going to be good this year. I don't think they get more than 4 wins. At number 13, I have BYU. I have them here because it's their first year in an actual conference. For the longest time, they were an independent. And I mean, people knew about them, but they didn't know how good. They didn't know that eventually they would join a conference. And so they've joined the Big 12, and it's their first year in the Big 12. I think they're going to struggle. As I've repeatedly said, every team in the Big 12 gets a record projection from me, and BYU will be getting one. And then at number 12, I have Oklahoma State. I love Mike Gundy, but inexperience. They're going to be young. I like young teams, but something about Oklahoma State screams they will not finish inside the top 8 of the Big 12 this year. At number 11 is another newcomer to the Big 12, and that would be Houston. I like Houston. I think it's going to take a couple years before they can compete and win games in the Big 12. I think in their first year, they're going to struggle to win games and make any noise. At number 10, I mentioned them earlier when I was talking about UCF's schedule. I have Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech is on to come up with Joey McGuire. I know I did a video earlier of 3 coaches a couple months ago that were on the hot seat. I know I put Joey McGuire on the hot seat, but if he could prove me wrong, I think Texas Tech could be a contender in the Big 12, maybe. At number 9, I have Iowa State. Matt Campbell is him. Matt Campbell is a really good head coach, but they're going through a scandal right now with gambling. I don't know how many guys on the team are going to get suspended, but the reason Iowa State's here is, like I said, it's because they're going through a probe at their school right now with the football. Some of the football players were involved in gambling, and I like Iowa State, but if you're involved in a probe, if you're involved in anything to do with gambling, it's usually not going to end well. Moving on. Number 8, TCU. Yes, I know they were the darlings of college football last year and made the playoff, but I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back this year. And that's because they lost a lot. They lost a bunch of guys on offense, especially their star running back, Kendre Miller, who got drafted. That's why I have them at number 8. Number 7, and I know I might get some slack for this because people might say you need to put them higher. I have Kansas at number 7. I was utterly enthusiastically surprised last year at how good Kansas did in football. And I think they can repeat that this year. But the problem is the Big 12 is loaded. And I think Kansas, they're another team that's coming up that's going to get a record prediction. And I think Kansas can win a bunch of games in the Big 12, but I don't think they're going to win the Big 12. And just a little teaser ahead, there's 5 teams in front of them that I think have a better chance of winning the Big 12. Number 6, Baylor. I have Baylor here because they have a returning quarterback that is very experienced, and Blake Shapen, and they have a coach that's going into I believe it's his 3rd year, Dave Aranda. And I like what I saw from Baylor last year. Other than collapsing at the end of the season, I think Baylor can win a lot of games this year. At number 5, I have Cincinnati. I know I said earlier that Cincinnati's, I don't think they're going to be that good, but there's an outside chance they are good. And that's why I have Cincinnati at number 5. And the other reason I have them here is because they showed in the AAC, the conference they came from, that they can compete and win. They were the first group of 5 team to make the playoff, even though they got left out of the playoff. But no, they did. I think they did make the playoff, but they showed that they can compete with the big dogs. That's, I think, why they got the invitation to the Big 12. At number 4 is another team from the AAC, and I just gave you their record prediction. I think they're going to go 11-2, and that is UCF. I love this move for UCF because they weren't getting enough respect in the AAC. They were getting passed over for the top 25 for the college football playoff. I love this move to the Big 12 for them. Not only is it going to bring in more revenue, it's going to get more eyes. They're going to get more attention now that they're in a new conference in the Big 12. And I love it for them. At number 3 is Oklahoma. Yes, people. I have Oklahoma at 3 for one reason. They don't have a viable backup QB if Dylan Gabriel gets hurt. General Booty, I'm sorry, he is not a viable QB2 on a contending college football team. They had their chance to keep Tanner Mordecai, but they let him slip and go to Wisconsin, where he's probably going to start. At number 2, I have Texas. And this is a make or break year for two people. The first one is Steve Sarkisian. If he can't win this year, he may be on the hot seat going into 2024. And then the other guy is a guy that was at Ohio State for 1 year, played one snap. He only went there because of money. I'm talking about Quentin Ewers. Quinn Ewers. He has all the potential in the world, but if he can't stay healthy, that's a problem. And if he doesn't perform well, not only will it hurt Texas, it hurts his draft stock. Because if he wants to come out this year and go to the NFL, he's going to need to have a good season. And if he doesn't and he gets benched, I think Arch Manning will be the guy that takes over for Quentin Ewers if Quentin Ewers either gets hurt or if he struggles. And the team I have winning the Big 12 this year is Kansas State. Yes, people, I know they were the darlings, the second darling of the Big 12 last year, but I like their coach, Chris Kleiman. I think he's doing special things at K-State. And I like the direction they're going in. I think they win the Big 12 this year. And I know there's no segment in here for the conference championship game, but I think it's going to be K-State and Texas in the Big 12 title game. On to the next segment, and that's Texas Longhorns schedule prediction. Week 1, they play Rice. And I think Texas is going to cream Rice. I think I said 55-14. So Texas starts the year 1-0. Week 2 is the big game. They play at Alabama. And I want Texas to win, but I feel like Bama's going to win. So Texas is now 1-1. They come home, they go back to Austin, and they play Wyoming. I think they're upset because they lost to Alabama. They come out and they steamroll Wyoming to go to 2-1. They beat Wyoming 55-14. Then they go back and they start Big 12 play at Baylor. And you saw where I had Baylor in my Big 12 power rankings. I think Baylor's going to be good this year, but I think Texas beats them 45. It's going to be a relatively close game, 45-41. 45-40. So Texas wins by 5. And they go to 3-1. They get Kansas at home. And I think Texas beats Kansas to go to 5-1. Four and one, correction. They go to 4-1 on the season. And then they go to the Red River Showdown with Oklahoma. This is always a good game every year. And I don't think it's going to be any different than last year in the Big 12. I think Texas beats Oklahoma 48-45, which makes them 5-1 going into the bye week. They come out of the bye week and they play at Houston, which I think they're going to beat Houston to go to 6-1. Then they come home and play BYU. That's another win. So 7-1. No. Yeah, 7-1. Now the big game with K-State. I think they lose to K-State and go to 7-2. This is going to be a good game. I think Texas loses a close game to Kansas State, 35-28. So they're 7-2. They go to TCU now in week 11. I think they're going to take their frustration out on TCU, and they're going to cream TCU, beat them 55-14 to go to 8-2. They get Iowa State on the road. That's another win. And I think they beat Iowa State 45-38. So that makes them 9-2. And they finish the season at home with Texas Tech. That's another win. 10-2 on the year. So Texas goes 10-2 with their only losses being to Rice. No, correction. With their only losses being to Alabama and Kansas State. Now, everybody's darling. Big 12. Here's Kansas's schedule. Week 1, they play Missouri State. I think they beat Missouri State handily. I'm not going to even give a score. Week 2, they play Illinois. I think they beat Illinois 45-38. So they're 2-0. Then they make the trek up to Nevada and play Nevada at Nevada. And I think they beat Nevada. So they're 3-0 to start the season. And they beat Nevada 55-14. So week 4, Big 12 conference play starts. They play BYU at home. I think they beat BYU. So that makes them 4-0. Here is where they take their first loss, and that's at Texas. I think they lose to Texas 45-28. I know I gave you a different score prediction when I did Texas, but either way, Kansas is probably going to lose that game. So, and then they come home and they play UCF. So, they're 4-1 going into the UCF game. I think they lose to UCF, making them 4-2. Then they play at Oklahoma State, and I think that's where they get their 5th win of the year. They beat Oklahoma State 35-28. Then the next week they play at home against Oklahoma. And unfortunately, I think they lose to Oklahoma to go to 5-3. They lose to Oklahoma 48-35. So then they go to Iowa State. And I think they beat Iowa State. And that puts them bowl eligible at 6-3. They beat Iowa State 48-38. So they beat them by 10. So, and then they come home, play Texas Tech. I think they beat Texas Tech 45-38. So that makes them 7-3. Then they get Kansas State in the Apple Cup. And I think they lose to Kansas State to go to 7-4. Yeah. I had the win prediction. Sorry. And then they finished the year at Cincinnati. I think they beat Cincinnati, and that makes them 8-4. Now, the next segment I'm going to talk about is the new Big 12 schools. And how I think they will do in the Big 12. The first one is Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is going to compete and do really well in the Big 12. And I think that they will win a couple conference titles. Houston is next. And I think they're also going to compete in the Big 12. But I don't think they may win a couple conference championships, but I don't see them going to the playoff. UCF is the third team. I think they're going to compete, and I think they will win some titles in the Big 12. BYU is also going to compete in the Big 12. But like Cincinnati, I don't know if they're ever going to win a national championship. Or, I don't think they're going to win a national championship. But, so then we get to Colorado. And the question is, how long does Deion stay at Colorado? If he stays there long enough, I think Colorado, I know they're going to compete in the Big 12, but do they win titles? Yes. Will they win a national championship? Maybe. Another Pac-12 team that's coming over to the Big 12, Arizona. I think they will compete. Arizona State will also compete. Utah will compete, and they will win championships. And the last thing on this portion of the show, here are my social medias. My Instagram is AlecPecano22, and my Snapchat is Alec Pecano. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. I will follow back. And same with Snapchat. Feel free to add me on Snapchat. As I will add back. And now we are going to get into, I have my screen shared with you, and now we're going to go over Baylor's schedule. Week 1, they play Texas State at home. I think that's a win. Week 2, they play Utah at home. I think they lose to Utah. Week 3, they play, so they're 1-1. Week 3, they play Long Island University. That's a win. So 2-1. They lose. They play at home against Texas. I think they lose to Texas. So they're 2-2 now. Then they play at UCF. That's a win. At home against Texas Tech. That's a win. Long Island, that's a win. Four and 1. Then they play at Cincinnati. That's a loss. 4-2. Iowa State's a win. So 6-2. No, that's 5-2. Houston at home, that's a win. So they're bowl eligible. At K-State, that's a loss. So they're 6-3. At TCU, that's a win, 7-3. And at West Virginia, win. So they finished the season 8-3. Here's BYU schedule. So week 1, they play Sam Houston State. That's a win. Week 2, they play Southern Utah. That's a win. So they're 2-0 to start the season. Then they go to Arkansas. I think that's where they take their first loss. So they're 2-1. They go back on the road and play Kansas. That's a loss. So 2-2. They come home and play Cincinnati. That's a win, 3-2. TCU's a win, 4-2. Texas Tech is a win. That's 5-2. At Texas, that's a loss, 5-3. West Virginia on the road, that's a win. Iowa State at home, that's a loss. And Oklahoma at home, that's a win. Oklahoma State on the road, that's a loss. So Sam Houston State was a win, so that's 1-0. Southern Utah's a win, 2-0. Lost to Arkansas, 2-1. Lost to Kansas, 2-2. Beat Cincinnati, 3-2. 4-2 after they beat TCU. 5-2 after they beat Texas Tech. 5-3 after they lose to Texas. 6-3 after they beat West Virginia. 6-4 after they lose to Iowa State. 6-5 after they lose to Oklahoma, and 7-5 after they beat Oklahoma State. So BYU finishes their first year in the Big 12 at 7-5. So we got Cincinnati's next. So we are going to pull up Cincinnati's schedule. Here's Cincinnati's schedule. Week 1 versus Eastern Kentucky. That's a win. Week 2 at Pittsburgh, win. So they're 2-0. Week 3, Miami of Ohio. I think they beat Miami of Ohio. So that's 3-0. Then they play Oklahoma at home. That's their first loss of the year. So 3-1. Then they come back home. Then they go to BYU, and I think that's a loss. Correction. I think that's a loss. So they're 3-2. Then they play Iowa State at home. That's a win, 4-2. Baylor's a win, 5-2. At Oklahoma. At Oklahoma State, loss, 5-3. UCF at home, 6-3. That's a win. Houston, that's a win, 7-3. West Virginia's a win. And they lose to Kansas. So they go 9-4 in their first year in the Big 12. Iowa State's next. Next team I'm giving a record prediction on is Iowa State. Here is Iowa State's schedule. Week 1, they play Northern Iowa. That's a win. Week 2 is the Cyhawk Trophy game against Iowa at home. I think they win that. So they're 2-0. They play at Ohio U. That's a win. So 3-0. They start Big 12 play at home against Oklahoma State. Win. They lose to Oklahoma. So they're 4-1. They beat TCU 5-1. Lose to Cincinnati 5-2. Beat Baylor 6-2. Lose to Kansas 6-3. Beat BYU 7-3. Lose to Texas 7-4. And lose to Kansas State 7-5. Now we get Oklahoma's next up on the docket. So, Oklahoma's schedule. Oklahoma week 1 plays Arkansas State at home. That's a win. Week 2, they play SMU. I think they're going to win that also. So they're 2-0. Then they play at Tulsa. That's a win. 3-0. Cincinnati on the road. That's a loss. No, correction. I think they beat Cincinnati. The week after that, so that's week 5, they play Iowa State at home. That's a loss. Week after that, it's the Red River Showdown with Texas, and I think they lose to Texas. They beat UCF, lose to Kansas, beat Oklahoma State, beat West Virginia, beat BYU, and beat TCU. So Arkansas State's a win, 1-0. So they go 3-0 to start the season. Lose to Cincinnati 3-1. Beat Iowa State 4-1. Lose to Texas 4-2. Beat UCF 5-2. Lose to Kansas 5-3. Beat Oklahoma State 6-3. Beat West Virginia 7-3. 7-4 after they lose to BYU. And 8-4 after they beat TCU. So they go 8-4. So let's go back. The next team. Oh, hold up. So now the next team we're going to go over is Oklahoma State. So Oklahoma State, the first week they play Central Arkansas. That's a win. At Arizona State, win. South Alabama at home win. So they're 3-0. They lose to Iowa State 3-1. Lose to Kansas State 3-2. Beat Kansas 4-2. Beat West Virginia 5-2. Lose to Cincinnati 5-3. Beat Oklahoma 6-3. Lose to UCF 6-4. Beat Houston 7-4. And beat BYU 8-4. So Oklahoma State goes 8-4. Now the next team is TCU. So TCU, the first week of the season, plays Colorado at home. And they're going to lose to Colorado. As you saw last night, I have TCU getting upset by Colorado in week 1. So TCU starts the season 0-1. Week 2, they play Nichols at home. That's a win. Week 3, Houston. That's a win. So they're now 2-1. They play SMU at home. Win. 3-1. West Virginia at home. 4-1. That's a win. At Iowa State, that's a loss. 4-2. BYU at home win. 5-2. Lost to Kansas State. 5-3. Beat Texas Tech. 6-3. Lose to Texas 6-4. Beat Baylor 7-4. And lose to Oklahoma to go 7-5. So TCU is going to go 7-5. We've got 3 teams left in the Big 12. Texas Tech schedule now, ladies and gentlemen. Week 1, they play at Wyoming. I think that's going to be a win, so they're 1-0. Then they play at home against Oregon week 2. That's a loss, so they're 1-1. They play Tarleton week 3 at home. That's a win, so they're 2-1. Week 4, they play West Virginia on the road. That's a win. So they're 3-1. Houston at home. That's a win. 4-1. At Baylor. That's a win. 5-1. At Kansas State, lost 5-2. At home against Kansas State, correction. They lose anyway. 5-2. BYU on the road. Toss up. 50-50. Could be a win. Could be a loss. I'm going to take it and say it's a loss. So they're 5-3. They beat TCU 6-3. Lose to Kansas 6-4. Beat UCF 7-4. Lose to Texas 7-5. So 7-5 for Texas Tech. And now we're down to the last 2 teams. K-State and West Virginia. Week 1, Kansas State plays at home against Southeast Missouri State. I think they win that game. Week 2, they play at home against Troy. That's a win. Week 3, at Missouri. I think they start the season 3-0. Then they get into the Big 12 play. And their first Big 12 game is against UCF. I think they beat UCF, so they're 4-0. I think they lose to Oklahoma State 4-1, but then they come back the following week at Texas Tech and destroy Texas Tech, so they're 5-1. Then they go to TCU at home and they beat TCU, so 6-1. Houston at home went 7-1. Lose to Texas 7-2. Beat Baylor 8-2. I think they also beat Kansas. So that's 9-2. And I think they finished the season with a win at home against Iowa State on Senior Day. And they go 10-2 and win the Big 12. And the last team I will be previewing their schedule is West Virginia. For West Virginia, they're not going to get any slack. They're not going to get any love from me. Week 1, they play Penn State. At Penn State, I think that's a loss, so they're 0-1. They come home, play Duquesne, that's a win. Lose to Pitt, so they're 1-2. Week 4 at home against Texas Tech. That's a loss. So they're 1-3. TCU, I think they won that game. So they're 2-3. Lose to Houston 2-4. Lose to Oklahoma State 2-5. Lose to UCF 2-6. Beat BYU 3-6. Lose to Oklahoma 3-7. Lose to Cincinnati 3-8. And they lose to Baylor to go 3-9. 3-9 for West Virginia. And they finished last place in the Big 12, which is not too shocking. And the last thing I'm going to say is I think there's 3 Big 12 coaches. I didn't make a segment on this in Google Slides. I'm just going to tell you the 3 coaches in the Big 12 that I think could get fired at the end of the season if their teams don't do good. 1, the number 1 target to get fired at the school he's at right now is Neil Brown at West Virginia. You just heard how I gave what their record was, their record projection I gave them. It was 3-9, which I think means that Neil Brown is most likely going to get fired. Number 2 is Brett Venables at, I think the next 2 are less likely because they've just started where they are. And that is Oklahoma head coach Brett Venables. He's only in his 2nd year at Oklahoma. And I don't think he's going to get fired unless they have the same thing that happened at a couple other schools with the whole recruiting violations and everything else. And then number 3 is whoever that Dave Aranda at Baylor. I don't think he gets fired, but I think they take a long look. And if he doesn't do good, then he gets fired, not this year, not next year, but the year after. If he doesn't do good. Then again, what do I know? I know Neil Brown's on the hot seat because I read 3 coaches. I read an article earlier in the offseason that stated that Neil Brown could have been fired this year, but wasn't because of his buyout and his contract. And that'll wrap up the show today. Please remember to like and comment on the video. And if you have any questions about future episodes of the Talk Sports Show, please reach out to me either in my DMs on Instagram or add me on Snapchat, and we can talk or comment on the video. And I do look at my comments and I do respond to them. I do answer. So if you want to comment on the video, feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section. And again, if you want to be a guest, that's another way to be a guest on the show is commenting on the video and telling me you want to be a guest, because I do accept guests on the show. I'm currently still trying to line up some guests, and We may have a few coming up in a couple weeks. They're not finalized. They're not set yet. I'm waiting to hear back from them. But, and like I said last night, when I'm on my trip in Ohio, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there will be streams from my trip in Ohio. They're going to be short, but it's going to be probably 10-minute videos each day of what I'm going to be doing in Ohio. I'm going to a football game, and then Sunday I'm going to a baseball game. And when I get there Friday, I may give y'all double upload that Friday. Maybe. I know for a fact that Friday when I get there, when I get to the hotel, I will be streaming for probably 35, 40 minutes and just telling all my fans what to look forward to, and that I may be streaming when I walk around the campus of Ohio State. Be prepared. But that does it for the show tonight. Today, correction. I will be back tonight at 10 o'clock. Thank you. And have a good rest of your afternoon. Peace out. Talk Sports, fam.